Two monks. Same monastery. Same teacher. Same texts. One follows the Theravada path. The early path the Buddha laid out, gradual, methodical, tested across generations. The 4 stages. The 10 fetters. From the first breakthrough at stream entry, the tradition says no more than 7 rebirths remain before liberation. The other monk takes a different vow. The Bodhisattva path. Infinite rebirths. Infinite compassion. He'll stay in samsara until every being is free, which as we covered means never. A third monk watches both of them. He bows respectfully, and then he says something that would have gotten him expelled from almost any other Buddhist monastery in history. I'll be enlightened before either of you. In this lifetime, in this body, not arrogance. A method so demanding that for centuries it was transmitted through restricted initiation. Master to student, mouth to ear, guarded by ritual and consequence. A method that uses the one thing every other Buddhist school tells you to eliminate: your own desire. This is Vajrayana, the diamond vehicle, the thunderbolt path, a school that looked at the Arhat's path and said, too slow, looked at the Bodhisattva's infinite vow and said, too long, and then did something no other Buddhist tradition dared, picked up the poison and drank it. And what happened next to the tradition, to its teachers, to the students who trusted them, is a story about what happens when extraordinary power meets insufficient readiness. Every time. We've been building to this, the 4 stages of the Arhat path, the progressive levels of awakening, then Mahayana's expansion of the question, the Bodhisattva vow, infinite compassion. Those videos ended with a promise: the debate between Arhat and Bodhisattva was coming. That debate is coming. But not yet. There's a third voice in the room, one that looks at both positions and says, you're arguing about the length of the path. I'm arguing about its nature. That voice is Vajrayana, the one whose answer changes the terms of everything. The 4 noble truths underlie all 3 vehicles. What separates them is what they do with the power those truths demand. That disagreement is what this video is about. If Vajrayana claims a path to enlightenment in one lifetime, faster than Theravada's 7, faster than the Bodhisattva's infinite, then the obvious question isn't what this path is. The obvious question is, why didn't every Buddhist in history simply switch? The answer tells you everything about what this tradition actually is. Theravada calls its own path the most reliable one available. Multiple lifetimes of gradual purification, leading to a guaranteed outcome. Mahayana looked at that map and said, the destination is real, but the goal is too small. The Bodhisattva vow extends the timeline toward infinity, not as delay, as method. Vajrayana looks at both and says something that sounds like arrogance, until you understand its logic. One lifetime, this body, this mind, this precise set of desires, fears, and attachments you arrived with. Not despite them, through them. If that's true, everything else in Buddhism becomes optional. The term itself carries the argument. Vajra, Sanskrit for diamond and thunderbolt simultaneously. Diamond because it cuts through everything and cannot itself be cut. Thunderbolt because it's sudden, total, leaves nothing unchanged. And like all concentrated power, it cuts what it touches, including the one holding it. Vajrayana's roots run deeper than the 6th century CE. Tantric currents already moved through Indian religious practice. For centuries before Buddhism absorbed them, what happened between the 6th and 8th centuries was Buddhism's systematic transformation of those currents into a coherent path. The Guhya Tantra laid the philosophical foundation. Then came the Siddhas, wandering masters who rejected monastery walls, who practiced in charnel grounds and marketplaces, who produced realization through transgression rather than renunciation. Saraha, one of the tradition's founding voices, whose Dohakosa, the treasury of songs, transmitted its core insights in verse. designed to bypass intellectual understanding entirely. Tilopa, who transmitted to Naropa through instruction, that shattered every conceptual framework Naropa brought to it. Naropa, who passed that transmission to Marpa the translator, whose work rendering Sanskrit Tantric texts into Tibetan, made the lineage transmissible across centuries. And through Marpa to Milarepa, the murderer-turned-saint whose story we told earlier in this series, who built 9 towers with his bare hands before his teacher would even speak the word meditation to him. Remember Milarepa? He's the proof this path was never meant for the untested. That transmission reached Tibet through Padmasambhava, whose story we covered in depth recently. His work in the 8th century established the Vajrayana lineages that preserved this path long after Buddhism largely disappeared from India. The Kalachakra Tantra, one of the tradition's most expansive teachings, still transmitted publicly by the Dalai Lama to hundreds of thousands of practitioners at a time, traces its lineage through that same transmission chain. These masters made a claim the institution found deeply uncomfortable. The fastest path runs through the material the slowest path tries to eliminate. Orthodox Buddhist communities, the monasteries, the scholars, the great university at Nalanda, pushed back immediately. Their objection wasn't ignorance. It was a precise recognition of what the speed claim implied about who would be drawn to it. We've seen this pattern twice already in this series. The established school said, "Convenient." Vajrayana's response to skepticism was then what it remains now. Don't believe it, practice it, then say we're wrong. But here's what distinguishes this claim from ambition alone. The tradition doesn't say everyone can do this. It says the opposite. Vajrayana is structured around 3 inseparable elements. Theravada's ethics as the foundation. Without it, nothing that follows has ground to stand on. Mahayana's compassion as the motivation. Without it, the power the path generates has no direction. And Vajrayana's method as the accelerant, which, applied to an unprepared foundation, doesn't accelerate liberation. It accelerates everything else. Why didn't every Buddhist simply switch to the fastest path? Because the fastest path is only fastest for those who have already built what it requires. For everyone else, the diamond cuts through everything, including the practitioner who isn't ready to be cut. Every Buddhist school shares one diagnosis. Desire is the problem. Craving is the root of suffering. The Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta names craving as the origin of dukkha, the second noble truth. Every Buddhist path accepts this conclusion. The energy of desire flows towards suffering. The work is to stop it. Vajrayana looks at that consensus and says, "You're not solving the wrong problem. You're wasting the most powerful resource you have." In Vajrayana's Tantric framework, disturbing emotions aren't simply obstacles to eliminate, they can be transformed rather than suppressed. Anger, in this view, carries the same intensity as wisdom. Desire carries the same vividness as clarity. What makes them destructive, the tradition claims, isn't their nature, it's their direction. Suppress them across lifetimes, and you spend those lifetimes wearing down what is, in Vajrayana's view, the very fuel of transformation. Transform them, redirect that energy toward its own wisdom nature. And the timeline collapses. The Havajra Tantra, that by which the world is bound, by that same thing it is released. That sounds powerful. It also sounds like the easiest way to lie to yourself, which is what the tradition says too explicitly, and why the method cannot be separated from the risk. Picture raw fuel and a lit match in the same room, no container between them.
Style produit sans explosion.
The raw material isn't the problem. The absence of method and vessel is. How do you know when you're ready? Vajrayana's answer: you don't. Your teacher does. The method requires a vessel. The vessel requires a teacher. And the teacher requires trust you cannot fully verify before you give it. In Theravada, a teacher points the way. Decades of solitary practice can produce liberation, without anyone's extended presence. Be a lamp unto yourself. the Buddha's own final instruction, recorded in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. In Zen, a teacher offers a koan. The student wrestles alone until insight breaks through. The teacher matters. The path remains fundamentally yours. Vajrayana says that model is insufficient, not as cultural preference, as logical requirement. If the practice transforms the most volatile energies in human psychology, and if doing it incorrectly amplifies those energies rather than transforms them, then you need someone who can see what you cannot see about yourself. Your readiness, your blind spots, the point where your practice suddenly reinforces what it should be dissolving. The guru isn't a shortcut around the work. The guru is the precision instrument that makes the work possible at all. The transmission Vajrayana requires operates on 3 levels. Abhisheka, empowerment, the transmission of the capacity to practice, not ceremony. Agama, oral instruction, passed from someone who has practiced to someone who will. Upadesa, pith instruction, the most direct pointing, available only after the first 2 are established. Think of a master glassblower with an apprentice. The apprentice has the tools, the raw material, the theory of how glass behaves under heat. What the master has is the accumulated capacity to see, in real time, what the material needs, something the apprentice cannot yet perceive. Follow this. Stop here. Begin again. No explanation offered. That isn't a flaw in the transmission. It's the condition the transmission is designed for. The moment the apprentice can fully verify every instruction before following it, they no longer need the master. The dependency is the method, until it becomes the danger. Chogyam Trungpa, Sogyal Rinpoche, Thomas Rich, known as Asal Tenzin. The 20th century's most prominent Vajrayana teachers brought this tradition to the West, and several were the subject of serious, credible allegations, and in some cases, organizational investigations and survivor accounts on the record. The evidence differs case by case. Documented misconduct, first-person accounts, internal community reports, and each deserves to be weighed on its own terms, not treated as one uniform category.
Nốt biên tập, trước khi pu bớt, với mỗi tên, gắn đúng loại nguồn, báo cáo nội bộ, thư ngõ của nạn nhân, điều tra độc lập, thừa nhận công khai, và vơ ri lại năm tháng, số liệu cụ thể. Không gộp trung thành document ham, nếu mức độ bằng chứng khác nhau giữa các trường hợp.
This isn't peripheral to the tradition. It's what the structure can produce when the vessel is compromised. When someone with genuine power and genuine realization uses the trust the tradition requires to take what the tradition never sanctioned. Vajrayana requires unusually intense forms of teacher-student trust. That makes discernment unusually important. When that trust is abused, the same structure that can support transformation can magnify harm. Vajrayana has no clean answer to this. The most honest teachers within the tradition say so directly. The tradition requires trust. Trust without verification produces vulnerability. The prescribed safeguard, years of examining a teacher before full acceptance, got compressed in the West to months, sometimes weeks. The institution moved faster than its own prerequisites allowed. And the philosophical structure makes the vulnerability worse before it makes it better. In many Vajrayana traditions, students are instructed to perceive the guru as a Buddha, not simply as metaphor, but as a trained recognition of enlightened mind, manifesting through an ordinary human form. This isn't devotional excess. It's presented as a technique. If you can perceive the guru's ordinary actions as expressions of awakened mind, you're training the perceptual transformation the entire path requires. Power trained on the teacher, then extended outward to everything. But if the guru causes harm, this same perceptual training becomes the mechanism of that harm, the instruction that accelerates awakening in a healthy relationship, accelerates damage in a broken one. The student trained to perceive the guru's actions as enlightened mind is the student least equipped to recognize when those actions wound rather than liberate. This isn't a flaw in the students who were harmed. It's the structure of the path itself. Given the same context, the same years of genuine practice, the same real results, the same relationship built over time, most of us would have trusted that teacher too. That isn't weakness. That's the system working as designed, through a vessel that was broken. The tradition hasn't resolved this tension. The most honest voices within it acknowledge. It remains open. Power requires trust. Trust requires verification. The method of verification was never built for the speed at which it traveled. Close your eyes, blue-skinned, for arms, seated on a lotus throne in a landscape of pure light. Every cell of your body radiating compassion that dissolves suffering wherever it reaches. You are Avalokiteshvara. You have always been Avalokiteshvara. The ordinary human body is the dream. This is the reality. Hold that. Now, who is holding it? If you are Avalokiteshvara, who just asked that question? That gap between the identity constructed and the awareness that noticed the construction is what Deity Yoga is designed to open, not as philosophy, as direct experience, repeated until the gap becomes the practice itself. This is the central method of Vajrayana, and one way to describe how it differs from the other two vehicles. Theravada dissolves the self through negation. There is no self, look and see. Decades of vipassana, watching the five aggregates arise and pass without a permanent center. The illusion erodes through careful examination. Mahayana dissolves it through expansion. Compassion extended outward, until the boundary between self and other becomes conceptually untenable. Vajrayana dissolves it through substitution. Replace the ordinary self, built from memory, preference, and fear, with an enlightened one. Then dissolve that too. The power lies in the sequence. The ordinary self resists its own elimination. Vajrayana doesn't fight that resistance. It redirects it. The same constructive capacity that builds the suffering self builds the deity instead, then releases it. The practice has two phases, neither optional. Apadikrama, the generation phase. The deity built in elaborate, precise detail, over months or years. Form, color, implements, posture, the surrounding mandala, each element specified in the sadhana and held with complete stability. Not visualization as relaxation, construction as rigorous as architectural drawing, maintained without interruption. Sampanakrama, the completion phase. The entire construction dissolves. What remains is open awareness, without an object, without a center, without the ordinary sense of someone doing the awareness. Generation without completion produces a practitioner who has built a more elaborate self-concept. Completion without generation produces someone who has dissolved into a space they haven't built the capacity to hold. Tsongkhapa, the 14th century scholar whose Ngagrim Chenemo, translated as Tantra in Tibet, remains the most systematic treatment of these practices, was emphatic on this. Both phases are required. The sequence is not optional. The teacher who permits a student to skip either direction isn't transmitting deity yoga. They're transmitting something that wears its name. Now picture a different room, a cold, unheated hut in Upper Dharamsala, February 1981. 3 Tibetan practitioners of tummo, inner heat, sit wrapped in wet, cold sheets. A Harvard researcher named Herbert Benson has traveled here with the Dalai Lama's help. Wires taped to the men's fingers and toes to measure something no one in his field had a framework for. By the end of the session, the sheets around them have begun to dry. The thermometers show it plainly. Their finger and toe temperatures have risen by as much as 8.3 degrees Celsius, enough in that cold room to explain the steam. Benson knew exactly what he was measuring. What he didn't yet have was a complete explanation for how the practice produced it. His paper, published in Nature the following year, doesn't claim to solve that gap. It documents it, The monks call this tummo. They consider it a relatively foundational Vajrayana practice, not even the advanced work. If a foundational practice produces effects a Harvard laboratory could measure but not fully explain, what do the advanced practices claim to produce? To understand what tummo is doing according to the tradition, you need its framework. For the interior body, channels, winds, drops. Nadis, the channel's energy is said to move through. Prana, the winds said to carry consciousness through them. Bindu, concentrated points of awareness at specific locations. There is no established anatomical correlate for nadis in Western medicine. There is no established neuroscientific equivalent for prana. The traditional framework doesn't map onto anything modern physiology has identified. And yet Benson's measurements exist, and later researchers working decades after him proposed that both physical technique and mental visualization may play a role in producing the effect without fully accounting for its scale. You've probably touched a version of this yourself. The second before a car accident, time dilating, everything unnecessary falling away. Or the opposite, a moment of creative absorption so complete the thinking seemed to happen through you, not by you. States where ordinary consciousness steps aside. Vajrayana claims these aren't accidents. They're glimpses of what the subtle body system produces when conditions briefly align, and the practices are designed to create those conditions deliberately, not as a side effect but as the method itself. The central channel, Avaduti, runs from the base of the spine to the crown of the head. In ordinary consciousness, according to Vajrayana, energy flows through secondary channels. On either side, liberation happens, the tradition says, when that energy gathers into the central channel and the knots at its major points open. Tummo combines breathing, visualization, and mantra to generate heat. The tradition says travels up that channel, loosening those knots. The experiential reports are consistent across centuries of practitioners. Benson's data shows something measurable that lines up with those reports. The gap between a consistent subjective tradition and a documented physical effect. Without a full explanatory account for either, that's the space Vajrayana has occupied for centuries. Before the rainbow body, Dzogchen needs a word. Where deity yoga works with identity and tummo works with the body's energy system, Dzogchen, the great perfection, is Vajrayana's most advanced teaching, and it works with awareness itself. The direct recognition that the nature of mind was never obscured, only unrecognized, not a gradual path toward clarity, an immediate seeing of what was always already clear. Longchenpa, the 14th century master whose work underlies almost every subsequent Dzogchen lineage, wrote in the treasury of the Dharmadhatu, since everything is but an apparition, perfect in being what it is, having nothing to do with good or bad, acceptance or rejection, one may well burst out in laughter, not absurdism, recognition, the laughter of someone who looked for the problem and found it was never there. The rainbow body is what the tradition says happens when that recognition becomes total. Jalu, the tradition's most extraordinary claim. Advanced Dzogchen practitioners, at death, after lifetimes of practice dissolving the physical body, hair, nails, a residue of light, the gross material body recognized as luminous awareness, returning to its nature, nothing left, the tradition says that isn't light. Reports from 20th century Tibet include witnesses and accounts from observers. Within living memory, a Catholic priest and scholar with no stake in Vajrayana's claims documented one such case, publishing his account without imposing the tradition's own interpretive frame. He didn't claim to understand what he had seen. He documented that he had seen it. There is no established scientific evidence that verifies the rainbow body claim. Individual reports have been documented and examined by outside observers, but they remain far from scientific verification. A case study is not a controlled study. Vajrayana has occupied that gap between individual testimony and independent verification. for centuries unresolved. Its response to skeptics has never changed. These aren't metaphors. Practice long enough and you'll feel them. That's either the most honest thing a tradition can say about something real, or the most unfalsifiable defense of a claim that demands scrutiny. Serious scholars hold both possibilities open. The accurate position for anyone who hasn't spent decades in practice is to hold that uncertainty, rather than resolve it prematurely in either direction. Return to the three monks. The Theravada monk isn't on a slow path. He's building the foundation without which everything that follows destroys rather than liberates. 7 lifetimes of purification from stream entry, the container that makes power stable. The Bodhisattva monk isn't on an infinite path. He's using the boundlessness of the task as the method, a vow so vast that the self which would complete it gradually has nowhere left to stand. The Vajrayana monk isn't on a fast path. He's on a path that will only be fast if everything the other 2 monks built is already in place. Power doesn't automatically transform you. It can reveal what was already unstable. This is the argument Vajrayana has always made, stated plainly. Desire without the container becomes more desire. The guru relationship without discernment becomes the mechanism of harm. Deity yoga without the willingness to dissolve what it builds becomes the most architecturally elaborate form of spiritual ego the tradition has documented. The body practices without ethical and motivational foundation produce power with nowhere stable to land. The tradition that claims to be fastest is also the tradition that most insists on what came before it. That isn't contradiction. That's the entire argument. Some consider Vajrayana the most advanced system of inner transformation ever developed. Others consider it the most sophisticated spiritual trap ever built. A tradition that offers power to the unprepared, raps that offer in real realization, and expresses real confusion when the unprepared misuse what they were given. Both positions have evidence. Vajrayana itself would say those 2 descriptions aren't mutually exclusive. Same path, same practices, 2 entirely different outcomes, determined by a single variable no external authority can verify from outside. Readiness. 20 years later, the 3 monks. The Theravada monk sits in a cave, still practicing. The current carries him forward. The Bodhisattva monk teaches infinite rebirths ahead of him, looking like someone who forgot to be impatient. The Vajrayana monk is sitting between the other 2, not because he finished first. He's showing the Theravada monk something about the energy underneath stillness, the power already present inside the gradual path, waiting for a method that could use it. He's showing the Bodhisattva monk something about what the vow has always carried, the concentrated force of a compassion that, fully realized, doesn't require infinite time. And they're showing him something too, the foundation he needed to hold what he was given, the motivation that kept the power from turning inward. Without what they built, without the container, without the direction, what he carries would have consumed him. The diamond cuts through everything, including the idea that any one of them had the faster path. The 3 monks were never in a race. They were always the same power, approached from 3 different directions. And Vajrayana's deepest teaching, the one the texts approach but never quite say directly, the shortcut only works when you've already walked the long way round. We've now mapped all 3 vehicles. Theravada, liberate yourself. Mahayana, liberate everyone. Vajrayana, do both in this body using everything you are. Which brings us to the debate this series has been building toward since the 4 stages video. Arhat versus Bodhisattva. Is personal liberation selfish? And now that Vajrayana is in the room, does the question even hold the same shape? That's next. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Leave a comment. After everything in this video, which of the 3 vehicles speaks to you? Which one do you trust? The answer might tell you something. Thanks for watching. Stay curious. Stay wise.